Okay, welcome to episode 3 of Petey's awesome guest panel. My guest today, you may know her as Scorpina in the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. My guest today is Sabrina. Sabrina,
Hi, everybody. How's it going?
good. You? How's everything going there?
Pretty good. It's all kind of crazy and everything, but I think overall we're doing okay. I know it's got to be tough and challenging and different stuff going on, but at least we're lucky. We're our whole family. We've had different, I have adult children too, and so we've had different configurations of the kids' home, so that's been nice.
Same here. Getting due here. I live in Brooklyn, but right now I'm at my summer home in Pennsylvania, and still like with the whole COVID pandemic.
Oops. Oh, I can't hear you all of a sudden. Did I do something? Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure what I did. I couldn't hear you for a second. I have undoubtedly pressed something. Okay, anyway, let's just go on.
Yeah. My question is, I guess maybe it's like a typical question, but my question is, how did you get into acting?
Oh, okay. So that's a great question. I started off mostly dancing, actually, and in I guess since I was kind of little, but I got more serious about it as I got to like junior high and high school, and actually started doing gymnastics. This is the long version of the story, but basically, um, from dancing, I decided, oh wow, I'd really like to do a musical. So then to do a musical, you have to also be able to sing. And that sort of came about more in college, which is kind of late for people. Usually they kind of get into those things, more in high school. But I was pretty much just doing dance, 1 year gymnastics, then that program got cut. But lo and behold, that kind of brought me to where I am now. So all of the weird things that happen like in our lives, I think lead us to where we're, meant to be. So somehow, even through all of this, depending, obviously, some people are going through some really, really tough times, and hopefully we all come out the other side of this, and there's some positive somewhere in there. Um, so then when I was in college, I started kind of performing just for fun, like student stuff. Like they had a thing at UCLA called Spring Sing, which you basically put together like a little musical number or something. So I guess oddly enough, that was probably my first sort of foray or something into musical theater, were these little numbers that we would do for Spring Sing. And then I decided, well, why not? Why not try doing some musical theater? So I took voice lessons, started singing. And I'm like, oh, I really like this too. So then that summer, after graduating college, a friend of mine was auditioning for some summer, they call summer stock theater, which is basically you go somewhere, you do a bunch of shows like back to back to back. So it's very, very much like immersion into the whole world of, in this case specifically, musical theater. So it was called the College Light Opera Company. And light opera is more like that blend or that middle ground between opera and musical theater. So it's a lot more sort of legit, proper singing and musical theater. And it's not done much now, but there was a time, there was a couple of composers, writers named Gilbert and Sullivan, and they did a ton of that. So this company, that was one of their things. They did like 3 shows like that, and then the rest were sort of more of your standard musical theater. So I think we did like 9 shows in a summer. So you would be running one at night and rehearsing for the next one during the day. So just a complete sort of, you're either going to come out of this loving or hating musical theater. You're just completely immersed in it. But for the most part, anyone that auditioned for it was already sort of loving musical theater. So I was probably one of, if not the least experienced person as far as like theater went. But the good thing was they happened to be doing a bunch of dance shows that summer, so I was able to at least feel, build a little bit of confidence in that, the fact that I could dance. So I got to tap dance in shows and do lots of other fun stuff like that. So then came back from that. Like I said, this is the long answer. So came back from that. I might have to run upstairs and remind my son not to keep running the bathtub. Anyway, came back from that and just I fell in love with musical theater at that point. So I think that really was sort of that immersion. I'm going to come out of this either like knowing for sure I never want to be on stage again, or just being all in. And I think I was pretty much all in. So I started auditioning for community theater things just around here. And that brought me to start looking for an agent, start auditioning in LA. Of course, if you're in Southern California, you're much more likely to encounter TV and film auditions than just theater auditions. And I was like totally open to that. So got an agent, which was pretty much the same way at that time. I don't even know. It's probably completely different now that there's so much technology, because back then we mailed things like in the mail to people. So I actually used my headshot that they took for our summer theater thing, that just basically the picture of us they wanted in the lobby. And I used that. Hold on. I'm going to run up the stairs real quick. I used that to, oh yeah, oh, there we go. He hears me coming up the stairs. Okay, here we go. Now I'm going to go back down the stairs. Okay, so I used that picture and for my headshot and sent it out to agents and all that. And I actually sent it out on some auditions and everything too, that very, very first picture. So I don't know why I remember specifically. This was when they were casting the Joy Luck Club. So that was like a great movie, classic, lots of Asian American actors. And they called me and they said, "Do you speak Chinese?" And unfortunately, I don't speak Chinese. And they thought from my picture that I looked like I was maybe like 13 years old. And I said, "Well, no, I'm not quite that young," because then they were going to just have me play basically a non-speaking part that was a very young girl. But I'm like, I'm not quite that young. I don't think I can pull that off. So basically, that's what kind of started up. So I didn't actually get to do the Joy Luck Club, which was kind of a bummer. But I did start to go out on auditions and everything like that from getting an agent. So back then, you would just submit your headshot with your resume. And the only thing I really had on my resume was that I had danced, I taught dance camps. I did, worked at Disneyland in parades. And then as far as theater, the only thing I had was stuff from that summer program. So I just put the things that I had done there and got an agent. And then he's just started sending me out on things. And one of the things was for Scorpina for the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. So that's sort of the super long answer to your relatively short question.
Now, before I get into the Power Ranger questions, I do gotta ask, like, the Joy Luck Club, that was by Amy Tan, right?
Yes.
And because I think one of my favorite actors slash voice actors is in the Joy Luck Club, Lauren Tom.
Oh yeah, no, totally. She yeah, there was like this whole group. The great thing about that movie was there is a whole group of wonderful Asian American actors and actresses primarily that really got to act in a movie. They weren't just playing like the girlfriend or the sidekick or that sort of thing. They got to have really substantial parts because of, obviously, the book is incredible and it was very, very well done. So it would have been really cool to be in it, but I love the fact that somehow with my really limited experience, they actually even called me to like ask me questions. So that was kind of nice. But yeah, I didn't speak Chinese, and my mom's from the Philippines and my dad's from China, and they didn't speak the same dialect of Chinese. So we really only learned English. By the time my dad tried to teach me Chinese, which would have been so cool, I was already like wanting to just go out and play and do all that stuff. And so I guess my advice to any kids who have the opportunity to learn a second language when they're young, you should do it, because it gets a lot harder when you're older. And it's always great to have, access to a second or third language. So.
Ah, very cool. And now I do want to ask you about say,
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you say that again? It's
I do
loud here.
definitely I definitely want to ask you about getting into Power Rangers because as a kid, because I'm 30 now, I was uh when I was like 5, and I just remember that episode. I was just thinking to myself, like, when the character you played that before you eventually see it was Scorpina, like you're thinking to yourself, there's something fishy about her, but you just don't know what it is. But my question to you is, take me to your audition. Like, tell me how your experience was on Power Rangers.
Okay, so I don't have the greatest memory, but this is sort of what I remember of it. Basically, whenever you got an audition, they would, gosh, at that time sometimes even fax you like the sides and things like that. And so the sides are basically like this little part of the scene that involves your character, a little section that the director, wants to see, or the casting director. In this case, like the first round, I believe was just the casting director. I'm not sure. There might have been a director in the room. And probably, I don't have a great memory, but I would say there's at least 20 of us maybe sitting in the waiting room, and then you go in and you just read your little piece of it. Somebody reads the other lines, and then from that, and I remember getting there and thinking, oh, they wrote my name on this. That's really nice. But then realizing that they had actually named the character Sabrina. So whether that was just complete coincidence, I have my own in my mind. I feel like they were looking through all the pictures of all of us when they got the stack of pictures, because back then you literally got them in the mail. So you physically would go through pictures. Nowadays, they would probably just sort of scan across, the submissions that were sent in electronically. And they saw my name and they're like, well, that would be a perfect name for the human form of Scorpina, because it rhymes with Scorpina. It has the same, basic structure. So I thought that was pretty cool that my name was on it. They went in, they saw all of us, and then from that group, they narrowed it down to 2 of us. And they said, okay, so you're gonna come back to the actual studio where we're shooting Power Rangers. And it was out by Castaic, near Magic Mountain, down. So probably from LA, maybe like an hour north of LA, hour and a half. So we went out there, and basically the callback was read the lines again, but now do it in the Scorpina costume, because they just wanted to see, what we looked like in the Scorpina costume. So I always say this, it's sort of like there was an old episode of Brady Bunch where Greg got to be Johnny Bravo because he fit the suit. And so I always say there's definitely a big part of this that was just that I fit the suit. So I think that I kind of lucked out in that way and looked similar enough to the original Japanese actress that they thought, okay, it won't be too jarring if we throw her out there, as Scorpina. Since this episode, she needed to come down and disguise as a student and interact with the American Power Rangers. So you couldn't just use the original Japanese footage, which is all of the stuff previous to that episode when Scorpina's up in outer space, or, that sort of thing. So that's pretty much how that all went. And then the last thing they did was they said, well, do you have any questions? And I said, well, honestly, knowing just the small amount I knew about Power Rangers, and it was only the second season back then, we certainly had no idea it was going to be going on this long, that they would still be doing like permutations of the Power Rangers. But I would say that my question was, will there be an action figure? Because I thought that would be so cool to have an action figure of a character that I got to portray. And they were like, Well, hopefully, but to this day, there hasn't been like a really good Scorpina action figure. There's been the one like Imaginatex, I can't even say it, with like the big hands and like this sort of thing. So, but so hopefully, like Hasbro will remedy that situation and make a really awesome Scorpina action figure.
But the concept of the character though, like I'm just curious, like what did you think of the concept where like Scorpina like, and this is like different description. They describe Scorpina like in her human form as a very beautiful woman, but in her giant form, she's mutated, literally a mutated scorpion. I want you to
Right, right. I always thought that was kind of interesting how like, when Goldar would get big, he was just a big version of the exact same thing. And so Scorpina actually literally changes species at that point. Although basically the same body, except all of the appendages and her head are totally different. I kind of liked it though because she got to really be a monster. And I think part of it is, I don't know, this is just kind of in my mind, but for a show generally geared toward kids, if you were going to have people fighting huge and getting like hit, it might have been less jarring to not have like a human face, right? On although obviously our little fight scenes and things like that, she just never gets hit in the face when she's in her human form. But for them to be able to like really fight her in outer space, they can hit her on the head and stuff like that when she's a scorpion, because then we're all a little better than. I mean, nowadays there's a lot of violence and like women get kicked in the head all the time. But I don't know. Back then, I don't recall. Hey, EJ, I don't recall seeing too much of that. Especially, yeah, in Power Rangers, once they were like human, you didn't see a lot of like fighting. So I think that might have been part of it too, is that it's easier to see the monsters fighting with the Zords and all that. So it's more like robots fighting aliens, versus Scorpina as a monster, but with a human face. It's a little bit. I think it was a little bit different, and that's why it makes sense to me that she morphed into an actual other species, really.
going back to what you said about like it's be like very different if it was like a human form, like in the giant form. Where I think they only tried that once in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and that's when this is when I believe Tommy was evil, and they enlarged him, and ironically, it was Tommy, Goldar, and Scorpina fighting the one Megazord.
Ah,
And
and
I
so,
think right,
and was his face showing?
his face wasn't shown, but he was in his green Power Ranger uniform.
Oh, okay, okay. Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it? Um, yeah, it's funny because like for at that time, a lot of the fighting was done purely by a stunt crew. So nowadays, I think they really make those efforts to cast like actors who, well, actually, even second season, all of them, well, most of the actors could definitely fight. But I think when they got to the fight scenes, they're like, well, why not just use this fight stunt crew from Japan that's like really works really well together and do all that. So even, but because my face was showing, I had to do the little fights. But that's why like Scorpina is incredibly not involved in some ways. I mean, they were worried about like, well, we don't want to accidentally kick her in the face, or she doesn't know what she's doing. So I kind of like Scorpina kind of runs around the peripheral edges of the fight, and then probably the one big stunt that I got to do was when the White Ranger jumps up and kicks both of us and we both fall back, and it was literally just jump back and fall onto this mattress that's out of frame, so that was pretty much the whole thing. So I think that it did make it trickier. They even the yellow and pink Ranger were like young men. They were young Japanese men, and they just had padded, costumes so that they would look like women. when they were in full costume, when their helmets were down. But then I don't know what's happened, since then. And certainly for the movie, then they had their faces showing. So obviously, there have been lots of different things, but it was definitely an interesting thing, and it was at that time more unique for the villains to have like their face showing. I mean, since then, after that season, there have been more, especially the female villains. But I think, and you would know better than I do, okay, so Trakina, right? Does she morph? Does she get big?
She did, but only in the crossover episode with I believe Lightspeed Rescue. But it was not her human form. It was a hideous giant monster form.
Yeah. See, I think it's the same kind of thing where it's like we're totally cool with the female villains being like having their faces showing when when they're interacting like with the other regular size characters. But when everybody morphs, it seems like all the female villains, we just become hideous like beast creatures, So it's just somehow when the big Zords are fighting us, then we're not like getting beat up. And also because all of that was original, or at least back then was original Japanese footage. So they wouldn't have had me big with big Goldar and the Zords, right? They wouldn't have had like me, Sabrina big. So it's actually kind of cool that we were able to be that way in the same episode with the big Scorpina, because they could use that footage since it wasn't like they had to jump to another actress, right?
Well, I think I just remembered something too, Sabrina, that there is one episode where Lord Zed, Goldar, Rita Repulsa, and her brother Rito actually did enlarge, and Rita actually kept the same appearance that she did when she was a regular size.
Oh, okay. So that would definitely be the exception. But Rita doesn't really, does she fight?
I never seen her in combat. Like she's one of those very few uh, villains that actually did do combat with the Rangers.
Yeah, she was more of like the leader, who could like command everybody to fight. But her obviously like it would be very difficult for her to fight in her Rita costume because it's like a big heavy gown. Um, so that's cool though, because I think that that's probably one of the only times I know of that the women with their face got to morphed and became big. So.
And I think at that point, I think it was Carla that was playing Rita, because Rita was played by the Japanese counterpart, but they didn't really use her like much, like in scenes. That's why they probably only showed her on top of the tower. Like, but
Yeah.
when Carla did it, like she was always like on ground. She was interacting with Rangers and other villains.
Yeah, no, that was great because she got. Oh, EJ, can you turn the volume all the way down on that? Yeah, no, she's wonderful, and I think that really worked out well that they had her to keep that character going, to be able to do that. EJ, can you turn the volume all the way down?
Because
Yeah.
sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, it would have been like people always are wondering why like Scorpina as a character didn't go on, and there was like sort of urban legend that I had somehow had anything to do with that I just didn't want to come back as an actress, which I always am like, why would that ever be considered true? But I mean, of course you never know, but at some point that rumor started to the point where it was actually on like um, either the Wikipedia or the Ranger Wiki or one of those kinds of things. And so at the very first Power Morphicon I went to, which was I can't remember what year, but that was like the biggest question everybody asked me. Why didn't you go back? Why didn't you keep the character going? And I said, well, I was never, to my knowledge, asked back. I was told that possibly because they just didn't have much more story to do or whatever. They couldn't figure out how to make that work since she'd already become a student once. Like, how is she going to fool them again with that same tactic? or but then why couldn't I just be in outer space, or that sort of thing. And I said, well, I don't know if there wasn't more footage of her in outer space, or they didn't want to go back and forth, or if they just decided, well, we don't know where this storyline's going or something like that. But to my knowledge, I was never asked to come back and do another episode. But if I totally would. I mean, it would have been really fun, because especially as a young actress, if you're asked to do a job, it's pretty unusual that you would just say, nah. I mean, it's always possible I was doing another job and my agent just said she's not available right now. But it was certainly never anything that was brought to me like, hey, will you do another episode of Power Rangers as Scorpina? Because if somebody had ever asked me that, I would have definitely said yes. I would not have said no. I don't know exactly what went down, but somehow that rumor had been started at one point. I'm like, no, if I had been asked, I would have done it. So either my agent had just said, oh, she's not available whenever they asked, or they just really hadn't figured out where to take her story, kind of thing.
And it sucked that Scorpina never came back, because out of all the hench people that Rita had, she was my favorite. I mean, I liked her better than Goldar, Babu, Squat, Finster. Because
Yeah, she's a really fun character. I'm so glad that I got to do that episode, and that she got to have that interaction with. Oh, sorry. And that she got to have that that interaction, with all of the characters. Although, let's see, I didn't have any dialogue with Billy or with Kimberly. I mostly just had dialogue with Adam and Aisha, so with Johnny and Karen. But it's still neat to see. I mean, I think what's so remarkable to me about the whole experience is the fact that running into Steve Cardenas like many years later through his sister married a friend of ours, and so it was just a bizarre set of circumstances. And then he's like, you really should do Power Morphigon. I'm like, what's Power Morphigon? He's like, and he said, well, there's still tons of fans of Power Rangers out there. Really? Why? Not even really putting it all together, that partially because the whole thing kept going. And then, of course, when everything came out on Netflix, then a whole nother generation of people were seeing Power Rangers and watching from the beginning, and knowing that it just went season after season after season, was kind of cool. So that's really what brought me back into kind of the fandom and everything, from being, away, having kids, being a mom, doing all sorts of different stuff, so, but it's been really cool. I mean, I really love, I've gone to Power Morphicon, gosh, 4 or 5 times now, maybe, or something. And then I did one Ranger stop, and I did Kamikaze, when it was Kamikaze. Now I think it's LA Comic Con or something like that. So I got to do a couple like local ones and things like that.
Like I've been to and this is where I met Steve Cardenas, and I met other former Power Rangers. I met Christopher Lee, who played Andros in Space. I met Roger Valesco, Carlos. I met Justin Nemo, all great guys.
Yeah.
And it's so much fun. I gotta ask you, you mentioned the Power Morphicon. Did you do any of the villains panels?
Yes. That was actually the first year I went. There were less of us, like especially the female villains. So the first year that I did Power Morphicon, I was the only villain on the panel who was a face actor. Everybody else was voice actors. And they are amazing, so we had all the big guns up there. So and so everyone's questions were more geared toward, answer this in your monster voice, answer this as so and so, answer this as so and so. And it was great, because I just was like in awe. But yeah, I was the only one who was because they were all playing the voices of mostly the costumed actors. Then the next couple of years, or the couple of years later, there was more of us that were because that first year Carla wasn't even there. That first year that I did it, and then once she was there, then we were on most of the panels together, and I think we were on panels together when we did Ranger Stop and stuff like that. And then Amy Roll, you know, Turkina, she was there. Oh, EJ, you need to keep that volume down.
Amy's
Um,
asleep.
yeah, yeah, no, and all of them, like that's the thing. I mean, if somebody said no, be honest, or any of them weirdos or not nice, and I would have to say, being totally honest, they have all been really wonderful. Like we have such a good time. Like I would hang out and go to a bunch of cons like all year long if I didn't sort of have to do a million other things. You know what I mean? It's very, very fun, and it's great to see like that the fans are still so so into it, but that all of the casts from all these different years, you know, because obviously the newer casts are way younger. I mean, it's been so many years, but they're all super, super nice, and we have a really good time because obviously we didn't work together. I only worked with a very small group of them, but it's like you almost feel like you know each other. And ran into Walter Jones at a salsa dance club in LA one time.
That
Com- Completely random. We never worked together, but knew of each other, recognized each other enough to where like we actually danced together and all this stuff. And I always wonder if anyone spotted us and figured out who we were exactly at that time. I mean, I'm sure people recognized him. I'm not so sure if anyone recognized me, just in regular clothes. Um, but it was just so wild. And then he's like, "Oh yeah, I teach salsa." I'm like, "You do? Like, who would think?" You know, he's a really great dancer and like all that stuff. But that's kind of an example. We were never on the same episode or anything, but I of course knew him, the original Black Ranger, and then he knew enough about Scorpina and had maybe seen the episode. I'm not sure, but he actually like acknowledged that he knew who I was when I'm like, "Hey, aren't you?" You know, it was one of those really random things. But so somewhere I have a picture of us together at it's called the Mayan, and it's a salsa dance club in like downtown LA area.
oh, okay. And I do want to ask you this because even as a kid, I was wondering how they did these effects. Like, could you tell me how like they did the effects of like in Goldar's vice versa, where you and Goldar, Scorpina and Goldar, tied Adam and Aisha to the tree? Like, how was that special effects? Like, how did they do that?
Oh, well, basically, the great thing is like the director would just say, so he has in his mind how they're going to put this together, and then just tell the actors, okay, on when she does this or when he does that, you're going to basically fall against the tree as if you've been like put like by attached back to this tree. And so then as actors, you just do what they tell you to do. And then when they go in with the special effects or CGI or whatever else they're putting in, so they'll put in the the big bang or the big, all of that gets put in later. So in the post effects. And then anytime like you quickly change, like you change from your human form, like my student form into my whole full on Scorpina thing, basically, and I was not very good at this because this was the first time I'd ever done it. I feel like if I got a chance, I'd be better. But basically, they were like, okay, so we're going to say, I can't remember if it was freeze or stop or what it is, but they basically tell you you're going to freeze. And then you're supposed to hold, not only hold that position, they're going to mark it on the ground, but you really should remember what, like, how your body is leaning to. Like you should kind of take like a mental note. I'm standing right here and I'm leaning slightly to the right or whatever it is, because then you go and get, hey, EJ, can you turn the volume all the way down on that for me? Oh, thanks. Okay. So then you go and change into the full Scorpina costume, and then they basically will splice that right together. So then they'll say action again, and you're in your outfit, and they've just got this pew. And then if you watch that episode, you can kind of see me shift. Like I'm student, then I'm Scorpina, like just a slight like weight shift. because I didn't really remember exactly, was I standing with more weight on my left leg? Was I standing with more weight on my right leg? Like I knew where my feet were, but I didn't know how I was leaning. So in retrospect, I would have done that better. But anyway, you become Scorpina, and then right away you move. So it's like it's pretty indetectable. But the smart thing to do is as soon as you become the other character, once you've spliced that. And what I love seeing, so I am not someone who's on TikTok and everything like that, but I do love seeing how people have like spliced their videos together. I'm imagining it's a fairly user-friendly thing because a lot of people are doing like this great editing. But it's that sort of thing where it's like you can stop a scene and then start it again, somewhere else. And it's basically exactly what they would do on the Power Rangers. They would stop you, you'd go change, you'd come back and stand in the exact same spot, and then they would start it again and split and make it seamless so it looks like it's happening right there. But everyone, all the actors would have to like get their ground marked. But I think like Karen and Johnny were probably really good at it by that point. So they're like, yep, we're standing right about here. I'm leaning on my right foot or whatever. So they look perfect. And I'm like suddenly shift over. But anyway.
Like the costume, like was the costume, because it looked like it was like heavy, like metal though. Like was the Scorpina costume like a heavy equipment, or was it rather comfortable?
It was, you know what? I just realized I have to do a quick thing. It was actually really comfortable. Luckily, it looks metal, but it was just a very like light foam, shiny, kind of thing. So it actually survived. Like that's the amazing thing compared to a lot of the full on like I guess the big monster costumes that were made of like really thick foam and armor and all of that apparently deteriorated. And when originally I started going to the Power Morphicons, I said, hey, does anyone know where that costume is? Because how cool would that be, to get to see it or, have it. I know they weren't give it to me, but anyway, be so cool. And then they said, oh, and I actually had a friend from college who at that point worked for Saban. And so he said, I asked and nobody seems to know where the Scorpina costumes are. But what we've heard is that all of those costumes, because it's been so long, have basically deteriorated because the foam deteriorated, right? And I'm like, oh, that's a bummer. And so then it was the Power Morphicon 2 years ago. So once Hasbro had it, walked in, with my rolling suitcase to go set up my booth and everything, and just rushed over to my booth, and I was like, okay, getting set up. And then Kent Brown, who's one of my like favorite fans, like from the very first Power Morphicon, just I've known him since then. He comes over and he goes, did you see your costumes here at the Hasbro booth? And I had either gone right by it or, just in the zone or had gone a different route. But it was literally when you walked in and like turned right, it was there. They had this full Scorpina costume in a glass case. Oh, sorry.
Not the Power Ranger
Oh,
jingle?
yes.
The Zordon jingle.
Yeah, my text tone is the Power Ranger jingle, just to
Awesome.
keep it all full circle. So so, and I don't even remember. I don't even think about it right now. Like I'm like, oh wait, I should turn that off. And everyone's like, wait, was that? And I'm like, yeah. So we ran over there and like took some pictures with it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. It's here. Everyone told me it was gone, right? Or probably deteriorated. But because it was this like more flexible fabric, it didn't deteriorate, and so it still exists. And it was in a showcase at Power Morphagon.
But you did don the suit one time, right? During a convention, right?
Oh, and so that one actually an amazing cosplayer. What is her cosplay name? Oh my gosh, I'm having a mental break. Her real name's Nicole, and I can't honestly remember Cendrillon, something like that. Anyway, Cendrillon cosplay. She wore it to the second, I think it was the second Power Morphicon that I went to, and she was wearing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, would you make me one? And then I sent her my measurements and stuff, and she said, you know what, we're nearly the same. I'll just send you this one. And I'm like, wow, that's awesome. Okay. I was trying to get it. Hey, EJ, can you turn your volume back down? Okay. I was trying to get it before Kamikaze because Kamikaze was at Halloween, and I thought, how funny would it be for Halloween to be in the Scorpina costume at Kamikaze, where I'm signing, stuff for Scorpina. But then it was funny because people thought I was just cosplaying. They didn't realize that I had actually gotten to do the role of it, because that convention has a ton of cosplayers too. Like, top level, they have their booths with their pictures and everything. And I thought, oh, that's funny. Anyway, so she sent me hers, and yeah, that's the one that I've worn, and I've worn it probably at some point at every convention since then, just because it's pretty fun. It's not as soft as the original because it wasn't built to fight in. Hers was very comfortable because she actually did martial arts in it, right? So you had to be able to move in it. So anything that looked like it was solid metal wasn't. It was a very well-made costume. So kind of the same way like the armor for any of the characters that you see fighting is made out of kind of a flexible material that you can just fully move in. And the only thing that was warm per se was the helmet. Like, I definitely took that off between takes. But not as warm as you would get in like a full like headdress kind of thing, like face covering. So as from that same Hasbro thing, they had the Goldar, but just his head. So I think the rest of that costume had deteriorated, or they would have set that up for sure, because that would be like how awesome to have Goldar and Scorpina's costumes to get, together. But they only had the Goldar head like in a separate little case, but it was the original like Goldar head. So that was kind of neat. They had brought out, those really old costumes that they managed to still have, and I hadn't seen them at any previous convention until what would that have been? 2018, the 2018 Power Morphicon.
Very cool. Because I know that they use two different Goldar heads, like one for the show and one for the movie.
Right. I think the movie, everything was brand new. You have like much more budget, so yeah, it was really cool to get to see the original, but also know that they just in general, I don't know who the different art directors and different stuff like that, but obviously from the original Japanese art directors all the way to whoever took it over in the US, were really, really amazing, just very talented. And I think that's been pretty cool to just be a part of that, and that their design of everything and the general like feel and hope that of course you would want for any children's show to be have good messages and all of that kind of stuff. So I think that's been kind of cool to have been part of the Power Rangers, like as a franchise, like over all these years, and hopefully people still get like positive things out of it. I think they do. I think it's been pretty well done, even through all these different people handling it. I think pretty well done.
Can I share something though? Like, I have to share this too because you mentioned like Halloween. I have a picture right here from my costume for Halloween 1994 that I want to show you, and it was really
cool.
This was Halloween. Let me just try to get the camera going. Let's see if I can try to flip it. I can't flip it, then I'll do this. You see, this was my Halloween costume from 1994.
Oh, that's awesome. I don't know why this keeps going off. It seems to get it to stop. Okay.
And it was just like Power Rangers was such an important like time for me. Like at that time as a kid though. Like every afternoon after school, after kindergarten, because that's when I started kindergarten, like around maybe 94, 95. And I just come home every day afternoon watching Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, me and my sister.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, let me
And
just tell one of the things I have to do every morning, like right around this time, is I have to take care of we have like people working, and I have to make sure the alarms are off and do all these other kinds of things, and suddenly realize, oh my gosh, it's getting close to 10 o'clock. So like, I better do that.
now in Goldar vice versa. Was Carla the leader at that point or no?
She wasn't yet. I think she started later that same season. I think that uh, in our episode, the only Rita footage was the Japanese footage still.
I see, which was machine. I can't pronounce her name, but let me see,
I can't
machine.
pronounce it either. I can't remember. I think she was also Filipino, but she was in Japan. She was acting in Japan, but she was actually also Filipino.
Did you ever get to meet the late great I think, the person that played Trini?
I never did get to meet her in person. I mean, she sounds like just an amazing human being and such a tragic loss. Um, Unfortunately, she was already off the show by that point. So our Yellow Ranger was
Right.
Aisha. I mean, that was it was super neat to get to work with her. But yeah, unfortunately, the only one of the original Rangers that were gone by the time I got to my episode, the first one I got to meet wasn't until I ran into Walter randomly at the salsa nightclub. And then after that, I got to meet the others, but at like Power Morphicons and things like that. So, and I don't even know if I've said more than a casual wave to Jason David Frank. So, even though we were on the same episode, we didn't have any scenes directly together. So I don't have like really good independent memory of hanging out or anything versus like obviously I was in scenes and with Johnny and Karen, and then Steve actually helped me with my martial arts kata that I had to do. Um, and then briefly, very briefly, Amy Jo Johnson, we just had like a piece of a scene together. But I think, even though Jason David Frank is in the episode, we weren't in the same scenes. And so you don't shoot at the same time.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. But and then I believe I've seen him from afar at conventions, but I'll be honest, it's such like a mob scene around him that I don't want to say I've been lazy, but I just haven't really made my way over there. Plus, I don't want to take any time away from fans that are waiting to see him and all that kind of stuff. So I've not actually probably spoken 2 words to him, but I do see things that he's done, and obviously think he's great and all that kind of stuff. But I've talked to Austin. We've been like hanging out after cons and stuff too. So that's fun.
Like I hope that I get to interview a lot of it. So far, like the only Power Ranger cast I got to interview was Amy and you. Hopefully, I could get down the road. Like, there's so many names I'd love to interview, like Catherine Sutherland. I'd like to interview Nakia Burse, Karan Ashley. I mean, it'd be so cool. Hopefully, I can get them one day to come on. And the name of the Yellow Ranger was Thai Trang.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I wish I had gotten to meet her, but I never did. I never got to meet her.
Like Austin, even Austin St. John, I like interview him or David Yost, and they're all very cool people. And I grew up watching them. Like you, I
Yeah.
grew up, and I will say this about like the Scorpina / Sabrina character. You really nailed that role because when I saw that episode, I'm thinking to myself, like, like played like there's only I mean one person I know that could play the seedy vain villain that great. like you did that like episode because you were in full villain mode at that point, and the only it reminded me so much of my idol, Phil Hartman, when he would play a character. And I'm a big Phil Hartman fan. And when he played characters, he played that seedy, vain, conceited villain.
Yeah, that I mean, just such a fun character to portray. I feel really lucky to have gotten to play her. And I did, I think one of my favorite like acting type classes was improv, and I took improv with a group called the Harvey Lembeck Workshop. And at that time, uh, their son was directing episodes of Friends, and or he actually would come and teach our class sometimes. Um, Michael Lembeck, and then Helene Lembeck. She actually was on. She was a really accomplished comedic actress. She was on Welcome Back, Kotter way back when, and then her husband would sometimes teach, and they were just hilarious. And the characters we would get to do and experience, and getting to do improv, I think just it's very fun, and I would highly recommend it if anybody wants to just take a class for fun or because they want to go into voiceover or acting or anything. Find a good improv class. Most of the people you'll see on Saturday Night Live have probably done some form of improv or sketch comedy and that sort of thing. And it's just a really good way, because you have to really be thinking fast, and you have to be able to come up with characters, and you have to, those kinds of things. So I highly recommend it to anyone, whether or not you're going to go into acting. It's also good. I mean, you're probably better on your feet from having to react quickly to situations like in everyday life. Like I think I sound like I own an improv place. I mean, that would just be because I'm just promoting it so much. But actually, my thing now is just really helping, or as much as I can, with communication skills for any students or kids that have communication challenges. And so that's really where I spend most of my time. And if anybody wants to follow, I do have a YouTube page for that, all that stuff. So if anyone knows someone that might want some ideas about helping a student with complex communication needs, that would probably be my only plug today. It's Inclusion Services AT with a dash, Inclusion Services dash AT for assistive technology, and AAC, which is the long augmentative and alternative communication. So, or, find me on Instagram. I have an American Scorpina Facebook page, and it's literally called American Scorpina. So that I have that, and I also, my regular Instagram is at SabbyLulu2U. It's long and awkward, but so feel free, people can follow me there, find the Facebook page. If you know anyone that might want some just ideas for how to help with any student or family member with any kind of communication needs, that would be the other side of the coin, which would be our Inclusion Services AT and AAC on YouTube. Actually, I also have a group of that on Facebook too.
Ah, awesome. And I did have one final question though. Like,
Sure.
what was the like after Power Rangers? What was next for Sabrina Lou?
I I kept acting. My goodness, how many years? Maybe like 5 years more actively. And then I definitely kept singing and performing like all the way through having kids, having a family and everything. I got married in 97 and then started having kids in 99. So, but so I would say probably another 5 years. I did Family Matters. I did The Young and the Restless. I did this show called Nightstand, a movie called Idle Hands, a few other little movies here and there. lots of plays, lots of musicals, that sort of thing. And but then once I started having a family, most of my performing, uh, was just not happening at all. And then I did always pretty much straight through sing with church. So I still do that. I sing at church and then go to conventions, probably not more than once a year, once every other year, just because a lot of other stuff going on. So I don't travel around and do much conventions. So I figure I'd rather do very ranger specific conventions for myself, just because I love being around the entire fan base and stuff. And since I can only go to, like one a year maximum, it's better. It's better for me to just be surrounded by the Ranger fandom and the other people from the show.
Sabrina, because like for this one, the question I had was, do I have your lesson to upload this interview?
Oh yeah, of course.
And I was gonna ask because I want to take like a frame grab or a thumbnail for the interview. Is it okay if we pose for like a
Oh
picture,
sure.
like 3 seconds?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. On the count of three. One, two, three. Thank you so much. And I just want to say,
I felt like really frozen. I was all.
I just want to say, like, because I'm a 90s kid. I grew up in the 90s. I was literally born in 1990. I just want to say that you're not only a Power Ranger legend, but you're a legend to all 90s kids out there that grew up watching Power Rangers. And
Oh,
it,
cool. That's fun.
yeah, and I hope one day we get to meet, whether it's at a Morphicon or any kind of con. Like, that would be cool. And I'll show you
Yeah.
when we get off. Like, I'll show you pictures of my experience meeting the gentleman that I met at the PowCon.
Oh, cool. Yeah, feel free to like send me any of that. I have to start like working, so I have like students that I work with starting at well, it's not the first one's actually at 10:30, so I just have to get ready for that. But I'm so glad that we got to take this time and that it's always fun to just get to talk and reminisce and all that good stuff.
And
So.
given the fact that I grew up watching you, this is a total true honor for me. And
Oh, well, I'm glad then.
yes, and plus I said Scorpina outbeats, in my opinion, outbeats Goldar, Finster, Babu, Squat, because she was the type that was less talk, more action type person. The rest were just like goofy. Like, I mean, they were funny, but they were like goofy, but they weren't serious. Like Scorpina was serious.
Yeah, she was very much like, let's get to business. Let's get these Power Rangers, so yeah.
Well,
None of this nonsense. No kidding.
yeah, no
The,
nonsense.
yeah, exactly. She's the no nonsense henchman back then. But yeah, it was just super fun to, get to be part of that and like get to see the people that played these characters that I didn't ever get to meet, since I didn't, the outer space footage wasn't me. And then the later years where they actually brought in like all the people to play those parts, I think that was really cool. So yeah, thank you